final thing to check if you've addressed the feet and the ankles and you've addressed the hips is your upper back. If you've made it this far and your upper back is holding you back, you're actually in a good spot because it's really just sort of a mind-muscle connection awareness challenge as opposed to a mobility challenge. So what can happen is if the upper back is loose, and what I mean by loose is you're not pulling down into the bar, which I'm going to add a clip here about what that looks like. I'll film that. So I'm here and my ribs are really splayed and I can wiggle my elbows around. I'm gonna go down and I can't really engage my hips when my core isn't set, and you're gonna see my low back flattens. And then I'm arching again, and then I'm rounding my low back, and I'm coming back up. And this movement puts it asks a lot of these erector muscles back here. So if your low back is telling you something after a squat session, you probably have a little bit of forward and backward tilt going on in the bottom of your squat. And we want to minimize any sort of pelvic movement when we're loading our spine. So that counts for squats and that counts for deadlifts especially, and overhead press, which isn't a power lift, but it's going to be in the series anyway, because I think everybody should be doing it, especially if you're benching. I digress. So to address this, notice what happens. This is the side view. I'll do this from the back. When I'm pulling down, and that doesn't mean I'm going super, super low bar, right? I'm just pulling, instead of just pulling my shoulder blades together and sticking my ribs out, you can't see me, sticking my ribs out, I'm pulling down, and then I have a tendency to flare the ribs, so I have to make sure I pull my ribs in. Now, my core is big, my core is tight, and it's like a Coke can, right? So the Coke can analogy, a closed can of Coke, one that we haven't pulled the tab on yet, it's hard to crush. When we are aligning our ribs and our pelvis, and when we breathe into the belly and pressurize that area, your core is like a Coke can, your spine is protected. If you've pulled the tab, if you're out like this and your tab is pulled, you've got a little hiss and it's a lot easier to crush that Coke can. So we want to make sure we're closing the Coke can by pulling the bar down, not just together, but pulling the scapula down, and then pulling the ribs in and making a brace, and then going down into the squat. A lot of times, if there is shoulder problems, elbow problems, or wrist problems in the squat, it's due to insufficient shoulder mobility and control. What does that mean? It could mean that you aren't pulling down. It could mean that you're squeezing together too much. So squeezing together versus pulling down. It could mean that your pecs are really tight and they're pulling the shoulder forward, therefore making it harder to pull back. To remedy that, you can grab, you'll feel the shelf of muscle. You can wrap your fingers around it, grab it, and then just move on different planes. This doorway stretch is fine, but this is for my pec major, right? My fibers run this way. Usually the culprit that pulls the shoulder forward is pec minor, and that is at this angle. So it starts here on your humerus, and then it crosses down this way and it inserts on your rib cage. So to get that, put your hand here, turn, and make sure you're pulling the ribs in so you're not cheating. This, oh yeah, I'm getting a big, big stretch. No, you're not. Pull your ribs in, and then that lengthens the muscle. Another way to do that is what I just said, grab go through ranges of motion. You can also roll a ball on your pecs too. We all have tight pecs. Some of us that are newer, it might be really limiting us, but for the most part, it's probably not your tight pecs. It's probably a lack of scapular control. So really practice on feeling those shoulder blades on your ribs, right? So I wish I could bend my hand the other way and also this way. I'll try it like this. So this is my rib cage. This is my scapula. We want them to stay together. When we overly retract, the scapula the bottom edges are down, but at the top it starts to come off a little bit. So instead of just pulling back and flaring the ribs, we want to pull down. And that's going to really lock the scapula onto your rib cage. And that just takes some mind muscle awareness to build. There are a couple of shoulder things that we can look at to address scapular control, which we will do on the wall.